Welcome back to another amazing episode of Plan Your Federal Retirement Podcast. I'm your co-host, Micah Shalansky, and with me is a frequent now returning guest, my sister and a great advisor in her own right, Jamie Shalansky. Carlina,
What
how
do
you
they call
doing?
that? A repeat offender, right?
That's what I was thinking, but I was like, I don't know. It's early in the
That
morning.
doesn't
We'll see how
sound
this
really
goes
nice.
first.
Yeah. Mike, I'm so pumped to be joining you as we talk about federal employee health benefits, FEHB, as we like to call it. It was funny. I was meeting with a prospect one time and they said, "Hey, can I talk to you about my FIB?" And I was like, "Oh, well, yeah, was it a tiny one, like
Was
cute
he like
baby
lie?
or
Like how big of a fib was
or
this?
yes?" And they said no, and they pointed out. I was like, "Oh, your federal employee health benefits. Yes, I would love to talk to you about FEHB." So I always like to mention that because the acronyms are so plentiful inside of the federal community that if you're not 100% sure what they are, especially if you're starting your career or mid-career, just always say the whole thing. Say the whole thing to make sure whoever you're talking to is on the same page.
Amen. So important. Now, as we start looking at the FEHB, it is a fantastic benefit. I think it's, Jamie, one of the best benefits federal employees have. Yes, you have a great pension. Yes, I love your TSP. You have some awesome things that are there, but being able to keep health insurance into retirement is an
Oh man.
amazing benefit.
Yeah, I look at federal employees, and of course, we're on the outside, right? We're not sponsored by the government. We're not federal employees. We just specialize in federal employee benefits. And I'm just green with envy. Like, I look at your healthcare plan, and it's amazing. And yet alone to be able to keep this into retirement, even after you've gone on to Medicare and it becomes that secondary insurance. So, Micah,
Yes.
one of the questions I get is we call them inside of our office because we have a team of people that just specialize in federal employees. So, we call them dual feds. And that's when you have a married couple and both of them are federal employees. And I get a lot of questions from my pre-retirees, right? You know, when they're about 6 years away from retirement and they start talking to us about
Right.
FEHB, and maybe both of them aren't going to go out simultaneously. Maybe one
Yeah.
person hasn't met their MRA, hasn't met credible service years. Maybe they just really like the mission. I've had a lot of employees
Yep.
recently with a change of administration love the projects that they're working on and they just want to see them through. They want to see them through to completion.
Right.
So when that happens, you know, the other spouse is like, "Hey, sayonara, I am out of here." But I want to make sure I keep my health insurance. So what I'm going to do is during our next open enrollment, which happens in November, I'm going to switch to my own plan so that I'm covered by FEHB because we've been having a family plan our entire career. So I want to talk about this because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about the rules in order to keep FEHB into retirement.
Yeah, and you brought up a couple of really good points, right? So dual fed, sometimes called tandem federal employees, husband and wife that have, both federal employees, and both are going to be vested for retirement in their own right. And this is a very big key right here. In order to keep your health insurance into retirement, Jamie, I know you know these rules, is one, you have to be in federal service, right?
Mhm.
Retiring with the eligibility of an immediate pension. There's several rules on that. Could be MRA in 10, it could be MRA in 30, it could be 60 and 20, 62 and 5 years of creditable service. But you got to retire with the eligibility of an immediate pension. And you have to be in FEHB for 5 years prior to retirement is really important. But Jamie, to your point, the 5-year requirement is just in FEHB.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean it has to be you as the primary person in FEHB. So if I'm on my spouse's plan and we have a family plan or a self plus one plan and I'm in FEHB, even though she is primary, that's okay. I'm still in FEHB. It still counts for the 5-year rule.
So I've got a client, Bob and Sue, which is, all of our clients are named Bob and Sue, which is funny because we have two sets of clients that are named Bob and Sue and are married together. But for convenience sake, so we never divulge anyone's private information, it's just Bob and Sue because the federal employee community is small. Everyone's worked with someone in different agencies. So Bob says, "Hey, Sue, I'm done. I'm done with the mission. I'm eligible for immediate retirement. I've hit my MRA. Sue, you've had the insurance as a family plan this entire time we've been in career. You still love what you're doing, but I don't, and I want to retire." Bob says to Sue, "I'm not sure what your sense of humor is going to be like if I retire before you, but let's see how entertaining you find this."
We'll find out.
Bob goes and he comes to me and he says, "Hey, I want to go to a single plan because I'm going to get ready for retirement and I know I've got to be enrolled. And then I would come to them and say, great news, because you're already covered under Sue's coverage. You've already been enrolled in FEHB. Now, the next set of questions that Bob is going to have is, how does OPM know that? How does the Office of Personnel Management know when I go to retire that I have in fact been enrolled in my spouse's plan for 5 years?
Well, Jamie, a couple of questions even before we get to that one, right? Is saying you're talking about the comment about he still wants to make this election and move under a single plan. Why?
Yeah.
Well, if we have a family plan need, so meaning you have kids that are covered under the plan, why go out into a self-only plan? Now, your spouse still has a family plan premium. That's not going down because you're off of it, because it's still a family plan. Plus, you got to have your own plan. So your cost really went up dramatically. So you could be looking at it and saying, hey, they're going to keep theirs. I'm going to keep mine. So maybe you want to get into, or you're a self plus one. Maybe you want to move to a self-only. Okay, now that's a little bit, 2 self-only plans is a little bit less expensive than a self, and then, a plus
family.
one plan.
Right.
Yeah, family plans are the most expensive. Then you have self plus one, then you have self-only. The 2 self-only plans are the least expensive. However, one of the things that changes in retirement time is you go to pay your health insurance premium. Great news, you got to pay the same premium you were paying before. The government still is going to contribute their portion toward that premium, which is amazing for the rest of your life. However, you're paying with after-tax dollars. So you're no longer getting a tax deduction for this. So it's worth looking at it a little bit and saying, hey, should we keep, in this example, self plus one under Sue's coverage? Because are we saving enough in taxes that covers that difference? Maybe you're not, but it's something to look at.
And we also have 2 deductibles we have to meet now, right? So we've got 2 separate plans. We've got 2 deductibles we have to consider. And a lot of pre-retirees love to tell me, Jamie, no, good news, I'm really healthy, so this won't be a problem. And when do they become suddenly, surprisingly unhealthy?
When their deductible goes up. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So knowing those nuances, like sometimes we're penny wise and pound foolish, right? Is we're looking at, where can I save money on this paycheck? But I'm not looking at that bigger tax strategy like you were talking about, Micah, pre and post tax. How are you paying your premiums if you go to retire? What really makes the most sense for you and your family? So now that they've gone through that and they say, okay, great, it makes the most sense for me to be under a family plan.
Yes.
I'm going to retire. I'm submitting my form for an immediate application for retirement. How does OPM know? Because I don't want to go out of retirement and be like, oh my goodness, OPM didn't know I was covered and now I've lost this benefit.
Yeah, really important to think about. One, it's going to be on your retirement application. So your retirement application under FERS is SF3107. And as you're looking at that, I believe it's in section E as in Echo, it's going to ask for your insurance information. And one of the boxes in there says, are you eligible for FEHB at retirement time? Mark yes. That's a really important part.
Even if you think you're not, just mark yes.
I would, let OPM disagree with this, right? But number one,
doesn't cost you anything.
Number one, on the retirement application, mark yes, you're eligible for health insurance in retirement. This does not say, are you the primary person? This does not say, do you want the coverage only under your name? This just says, are you eligible for FEHB in retirement? So we mark yes on that one. Jamie, that's step one. Step two, if you are under a spousal plan, even if you are under your own plan, your agency has to provide evidence that you were covered for more than 5 years. That form number is escaping me, but there's a health insurance certification form that says, yes, they were covered for 5 years. If you don't have it because you weren't the primary, then that means your HR reaches out to the agency of your spouse and then they can get it from there. And they can say, hey, yep, you were on FEHB, you're in FEHB for this last 5 years. They have a certificate of health insurance that they include in your retirement application. Those 2 things show that you are eligible for FEHB in your retirement. And Jimmy, to go on a little bit more on this, if I may, is that this is the one document we really look for when you're not retiring as the primary person. So in this example, Bob's retiring. Sue's going to keep the insurance under her name. Bob's going to retire first. Since the insurance is under that, After they retire, we like all of our clients to get us a copy of all of the documentation that they got from OPM. When we get that, one of the things that I want to look for is this health insurance certification. Did OPM send that off? That's a thing that sometimes we see missing. Now, does that mean if it's missing, you lost your health insurance? No. What that means is I know OPM is going to ask us a question. OPM is going to go, hey, Bob, you're retired. You marked yes on this form. We don't have a health insurance certification. Where did that come from? So we can be working on that in the meantime to speed up the retirement process.
Yeah. And that alleviates a lot of the trickling questions that end up happening, right? So what if something happens to Sue, God forbid, prematurely, and she was still working and my health insurance was covered under her. And then now we've opened up this survivor can, and we're just really trying to mitigate any concerns, anything that puts you in jeopardy of potentially losing your health insurance in retirement, because it is one of your greatest benefits.
Amen. Such a great benefit. Now, keep in mind, into retirement, if you've met those two rules, that you've retired with the eligibility of an immediate pension, number one, and number two, you've been in FEHB for 5 years prior to retirement. Your spouse, let's talk about non-dual feds, non-tandem federal employees for a second. Your spouse is working on the outside sector, and you want health insurance for her into retirement, then what we say is she has two rules. She has to meet with this as well. Number one is she must be on as a survivor benefit. So inside of your retirement form, I believe it's section D as in Delta, you got to leave her a survivor benefit of at least the maximum, which is half, or the reduced, which is 25. If you leave no survivor benefit, your health insurance dies when you do. All right, that's number one. The second requirement your spouse has to make is that they have to be in FEHB, not for 5 years. They have to be in FEHB before you die.
This becomes such a critical planning opportunity because sometimes in the private sector, although not often,
not often anymore,
sometimes there is a really good health insurance program offered to the spouse who's not a federal employee. So making sure that you're really thinking this strategy out and playing those different scenarios, right? That if life goes as we hope it should, you're retiring together, you're reliving a beautiful retirement life. But if it doesn't go as planned, what's going to happen?
Such a good question. All right. So this podcast this day is going to be a little short and sweet. We just want to make sure we're jumping on talking about your best benefit, which is your health insurance, because we'll be getting a lot of questions about that, especially with tandem dual federal employees, what that means. Jamie, this podcast is all about action items for our listeners, though. What's one thing they could do this week to make sure they're improving their retirement?
I would love to see them have different scenarios, and I would love to say scenario 1, 2, and 3. And this is really hard to think about, right? So scenario 1, life goes as it should. We're both alive and retired. Who's going to have what benefit? How do we have this coming in? Who's got this coverage? How are we going to when we're Medicare eligible, what happens then? And scenario, that's not fun to think about, but it is something that should be addressed. So at least you have a plan. What if Bob dies prematurely? And scenario 3, what if Sue passes prematurely? What options, what changes, what transitions are you going to make?
Boy, I said one thing you could do this week. That's a big task for this week. All right, so I'm going to make mine a little lighter on that one. Whether you're an active federal employee or retired federal employee, every open season, you get to make an election in your health insurance. The vast majority of federal employees do nothing with their health insurance because they're so scared about making a change. So my action item for you, put a date on your calendar. The second week to November to the second week of December is open season. So pick November 20th, just because I'm picking a date out of my head. Put it on your calendar. Say, hey, review the health insurance. If you have FEHB, Blue Cross Blue Shield, look at Samba, look at GIHA, look at mail handlers. Just look at one other policy. Just pick one and look at it and make an educated and informed decision to either stay in your current insurance or explore another one. But look at one other one this year.
I love it.
Awesome. Jamie, thank you so much for jumping on this podcast with me. As always, it was a ton of fun. And until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.